Enter Brompton Cemetery through its main gates, and it doesn't take long to get a sense of direction. The path is wide, straight and deliberate. Trees line it evenly, as if planted not for shade or variety, but for rhythm. The route is clear and unmistakable. At the end of the avenue sits the dome of the chapel, the focal point, framed precisely by the lines of trees. Nothing here feels accidental. This is a place designed to draw you, slowly and calmly, in one direction. Today people come here to exercise, to talk, or simply to sit and think, a space of pause rather than passage. And yet Brompton Cemetery was never designed for leisure or recreation. It was built to solve a very specific problem. Because by the time it opened in 1840, London had run out of room to bury its dead. For centuries, burial in London happened close to home. The dead were laid to rest beside the parish church, near the streets where they'd lived and worked. The churchyard sat at the centre of everyday life, passed on the way to market, to worship, and to work. That arrangement depended on something London could no longer provide: space. By the early 19th century, London was growing faster than its existing systems could cope with. Industrialisation drew people in, housing densified, and death, constant, ordinary and unavoidable, began to accumulate faster than the ground set aside for it could absorb. Churchyards filled, graves were reopened, and new burials laid over old ones. Often those graves were reopened before their occupants had fully decomposed. Coffins were stacked in pits. Bones were shifted aside to make room for new arrivals. This was burial piled on burial, the only option left when churchyards could no longer expand outwards. In the City of London, where space was already tightest, the pressure became especially visible. Churchyards, hemmed in by streets and buildings, had nowhere left to go. Repeated plague outbreaks accelerated the process. At places like St. Olave, Hart Street, mass burials raised the level of the churchyard itself. Today, you descend steps to enter the church, an entrance that was once at street level. The system itself had reached its limits, and the strain could no longer be contained. Liquids were reported to seep from overcrowded graves. Noxious gases were said to escape. Cellars flooded. The smell of burial grounds became a recurring feature of pamphlets, letters, and complaints. Londoners lived among the physical consequences of their dead. And then came fear. Victorian London didn't yet understand disease in biological terms, but it believed deeply in atmosphere. Illness was thought to spread through foul air, miasma rising from rotting organic matter, and churchyards, dense with decomposing bodies, seemed obvious sources of danger. When sickness spread through the city, attention returned to the burial grounds. Whether those beliefs were correct mattered less than the conclusion people drew. The situation was no longer tolerable. By the middle of the 19th century, burial was no longer just a religious matter or a local custom. It had become a public health issue, a moral concern, and a question of urban management. Victorian society was acutely sensitive to symbolism. The idea that the dead should decay beside churches, close to homes and shops, began to feel improper, even indecent. Death needed dignity. It needed order. And above all, it needed to be kept at a distance from the lives of the living. Even as new burial grounds were being imagined, some were already asking a more radical question: whether burial itself was the problem, and whether a modern city might one day dispose of its dead without land at all. For now, London chose a different answer. It would move the dead beyond the city. In the 1830s and 40s, a ring of new cemeteries appeared beyond the dense core of the city. They were large, planned, and deliberately separated from everyday life. Later they would be known collectively as the Magnificent Seven, but their individual characters differed. Some leaned towards the romantic, others towards the plainly functional. Brompton was different. It was the most consciously architectural of them all, a cemetery designed not to resemble countryside, but to feel like a place of ceremony, imposing order through architecture rather than landscape. It opened in 1840 as the West of London and Westminster Cemetery, laid out on open land between Old Brompton Road and Fulham Road, beyond the city's western edge. From the beginning, its intentions were clear. This was not a burial ground that grew by accident, plot by plot, as churchyards had done for centuries. It arrived fully formed, planned and measured, a single, coherent composition. Brompton feels less like a garden than a cathedral. The long avenue becomes a nave, the chapel its altar, while the great curving colonnades evoke Rome rather than rural England, an engineer's answer to mortality. Here, burial would be clean, removed from the chaos of the parish churchyard and reordered according to Victorian ideals of health, dignity and control. But Brompton was also a business. Burial plots were sold as property, and location mattered. Visibility mattered. The most desirable graves lined the main avenues, where monuments were built to be seen and remembered. Further away, the space grew quieter, less theatrical. Burial there was still a necessity, but it was no longer a statement. Even in death, social status was carefully maintained. One mausoleum captures that ambition perfectly. The tomb of Hannah Courtoy and her daughters, a massive granite structure set deliberately at the crossing of two avenues. Its scale is impossible to ignore. It dominates its surroundings, securing visibility and permanence in stone. In later years, the same monument would attract stranger interpretations, including the persistent myth that it concealed a time machine. When memory fades, speculation rushes in to take its place. Brompton also holds figures remembered for very different reasons from wealth or display. Among its graves is Emmeline Pankhurst, buried here decades after the cemetery opened. She is remembered today not for the monument above her, but for her public struggle and the legacy it left behind. For a time, the new arrangement of burial beyond the city proved effective. Cemeteries like Brompton absorbed tens of thousands of burials, easing the strain on the inner city. Churchyards closed, and as London grew, its dead were kept at arm's length. Then the ground shifted again. By the end of the 19th century, cremation, once controversial, resisted, and legally constrained, began to gain acceptance. It offered something burial never could: efficiency. No land to purchase, no ground to fill, no space to run out. The very logic that had justified the great cemeteries began to weaken. Burials declined, paths grew quieter, nature returned, and the city itself continued to expand until the cemetery built beyond London found itself surrounded by it. The city's edge moved, as it always does. Today, Brompton Cemetery is still a working burial ground, but it has also become something else entirely: a public park, a wildlife corridor, a place of stillness inside the city. The cathedral-like space built to manage death has become a place for the living. London rarely dismantles the systems that once solved its problems. It absorbs them, softens them, and folds them into everyday life. Brompton and the other magnificent 7 cemeteries were built to cope with a crisis. The problem faded. London held on to the solution.